Have you ever felt like no matter how smart or hardworking you are, others always seem to outmaneuver you? Today, we're diving into 21 timeless rules that reveal how to outsmart anyone in a world where perception, strategy, and cunning dominate success. In the modern world, nothing is as potent as the perception others hold of you. The truth, your intentions, or even your abilities often matter far less than the image you project. People do not judge you by your inner virtues or moral compass. They judge by what they see, hear, and feel. In every boardroom, social circle, or public arena, perception becomes the lens through which your power is measured, and failing to manage that perception leaves you vulnerable to manipulation, betrayal, and irrelevance. To dominate, one must first control the narrative surrounding oneself. When your rivals cannot accurately gauge your capabilities or intentions, they stumble into traps of their own making. This does not mean you must become deceitful for its own sake, but rather that you must understand how appearances influence behavior. Those who project confidence and mastery are often assumed to possess it, and others will defer, follow, or fear accordingly. Understanding this principle begins with observation. Watch how people respond to appearances in your own life. Notice how a confident posture, a sharp word, or a carefully curated action can shift a room's energy. Leaders, whether in politics, business, or social hierarchies, are rarely judged by their competence alone. They are judged by the story that surrounds them. The individual who walks into a meeting with calm authority, whose reputation precedes them through subtle signals of power, often achieves far more than the one whose talents are hidden beneath humility or hesitation. The world responds to signals, not silent skill. This is why the cultivation of perception is not superficial. It is essential. Mastering perception requires control over both your own presentation and the channels through which others interpret it. Every gesture, every word, every appearance must be intentional. In a digital age, this extends beyond physical presence into social media, communications, and public visibility. One misstep, one uncontrolled rumor, can tarnish years of careful positioning. Conversely, a strategic display of strength or competence can multiply influence exponentially. Those who understand this principle manipulate not just what they do, but how it is interpreted. The perception of decisiveness, competence, and inevitability can make opponents hesitate, allies trust more, and observers follow instinctively. However, controlling perception is not merely about exaggeration or illusion. It is about framing. You must present yourself in ways that highlight strengths while obscuring vulnerabilities. If one must conceal weakness, do so with subtlety. If one must appear generous, make it calculated. Human beings are wired to act on cues rather than facts. A leader who appears resolute will often be given the benefit of doubt, while one who appears uncertain will be undermined before action begins. This principle extends even to failures. How a person handles setbacks is often more influential than the setbacks themselves. If you frame a mistake as a controlled experiment or a calculated risk, others perceive strategic brilliance rather than incompetence. Furthermore, perception can be a weapon against rivals. If they believe you possess resources, allies, or influence that you do not, they act under false assumptions, often giving you leverage. Conversely, underestimating an adversary based on perceived weakness is one of the oldest mistakes in history. By carefully curating the signals you send, you can make others act in ways that benefit you without ever revealing your true hand. In this sense, perception is both shield and sword. It allows you to protect your vulnerabilities while striking at the illusions of your opponents. To fully harness perception, one must understand the psychology of the observers. People are drawn to authority, confidence, and consistency. Erratic behavior, self-doubt, or contradictory actions erode influence instantly. Therefore, all actions must be aligned with the image you intend to cultivate. Reputation becomes a form of currency, and it can be spent, invested, or leveraged to achieve outcomes beyond the immediate capabilities of any individual. When perception is controlled, the world bends subtly to your will. Obstacles appear smaller, opportunities larger, and rivals uncertain. Even in personal relationships, the same principle applies. People trust those who seem competent, wise, and steady, while they question those whose image fluctuates. Manipulating perception is not about deceit for its own sake, but about guiding decisions and shaping expectations. Every compliment, criticism, or gesture can be tuned to reinforce the narrative you wish to establish. In negotiations, the person perceived as more powerful rarely concedes ground, even if the underlying reality is more balanced. This perception alone can dictate the flow of events, demonstrating that reality is, to a large degree, subordinate to appearances. Ultimately, the mastery of perception is the mastery of influence itself. By shaping how others see you, you shape how they respond, how they trust, how they fear, and how they follow. The individual who understands this can navigate a world filled with competition, ambition, and cunning with unmatched advantage. Those who neglect it often find themselves blindsided by those who excel at signaling strength, competence, and inevitability. In every encounter, one must ask not only what is true, but what appears true, and ensure that appearance serves one's purpose in the relentless pursuit of power. In the realm of influence and competition, knowledge alone is insufficient. One must convert that knowledge into action that yields advantage over others. Every situation presents opportunities, weaknesses, and potential leverage points. Those who recognize and exploit these elements rise above mediocrity, while those who act without foresight stumble into traps of their own making. Strategic advantage is not a matter of brute force or unrefined skill. It is the ability to perceive the terrain of human behavior and circumstance, anticipate moves, and position oneself to strike or defend with precision. In a world overflowing with ambition and rivalry, the individual who identifies the smallest gaps and acts decisively gains the upper hand, often before others even realize that a game is being played. To cultivate strategic advantage, one must first engage in meticulous observation. Every opponent, colleague, or rival exhibits patterns, preferences, and blind spots. The successful manipulator studies these traits not merely to react, but to anticipate and control. Understanding motivations, ambitions, and insecurities allows one to predict actions and prepare responses that exploit the inherent weaknesses of others. A person who overlooks these subtleties may rely on sheer effort or popularity, but these alone rarely secure lasting dominance. The subtlety lies in recognizing the invisible levers that govern behavior and exploiting them with efficiency and discretion. Timing is crucial. A well-calculated intervention at the right moment can shift the balance of power irrevocably. Moreover, strategic advantage often emerges from positioning rather than confrontation. It is not always necessary to overpower an adversary directly. It is often wiser to maneuver circumstances so that the adversary defeats themselves or yields voluntarily. A skilled strategist observes not just the immediate conflict, but the wider context, the social, economic, and psychological forces at play, and aligns actions accordingly. By creating scenarios where others act in predictable ways, one can conserve resources while maximizing influence. This principle applies equally to corporate settings, political maneuvering, or social dynamics, where subtlety and foresight outweigh aggression and impulse. A seemingly minor advantage, when leveraged correctly, can grow exponentially, reshaping the landscape of power in ways that appear natural and inevitable to outsiders. Part of achieving strategic advantage lies in flexibility. Rigid plans are fragile, circumstances evolve, and unforeseen variables emerge. Those who cling to a single strategy without adaptation are often outpaced by more nimble competitors. Strategic thinkers maintain a vision while remaining fluid, adjusting tactics as new information emerges. This requires both patience and audacity. Patience to wait for the optimal moment to act, and audacity to seize opportunities that others may hesitate to claim. Adaptability transforms temporary advantages into lasting dominance, because it allows one to respond to uncertainty without panic, turning potential threats into avenues for gain. Another critical element is resource management. Strategic advantage is not merely intellectual, it is practical. Relationships, alliances, information, and reputation all constitute resources that must be cultivated and deployed judiciously. Knowing when to reveal or withhold information, when to grant favors or demand loyalty, and when to act openly versus covertly determines whether an advantage is fleeting or sustainable. Those who act without consideration of these dynamics often squander opportunities, while those who integrate resources into a coherent plan amplify the impact of each move. Influence accumulates when every action is calculated to reinforce positioning, creating a network of leverage that extends far beyond immediate interactions. Furthermore, the perception of advantage can itself become an advantage. Rivals often act not on actual threats, but on perceived ones. By signaling strength, preparedness, and inevitability, one can manipulate the actions of others without direct engagement. The individual who seems always a step ahead discourages opposition, encourages alliances, and fosters dependency, all while conserving energy and resources. In this sense, strategic advantage is not merely about what is true, but about controlling the beliefs and decisions of others in ways that enhance one's own position. Psychological manipulation, subtle deception, and carefully framed displays of competence are tools of the strategist, employed not for vanity, but for the expansion and protection of power. Even in competitive environments that emphasize fairness or merit, strategic advantage is decisive. Those who rely solely on rules, luck, or goodwill often falter against those who understand the interplay of influence, timing, and resource deployment. Advantage is cumulative. Small, deliberate actions compound into significant power over time. Awareness of this principle allows one to act deliberately, anticipating both the moves of rivals and the reactions of allies. By constantly assessing the environment, identifying vulnerabilities, and maneuvering subtly, one ensures that advantage is never incidental but intentional. Transforming circumstances into instruments of personal ascendance. Influence is the silent currency of power, and yet most people squander it through impulsive generosity, indiscriminate trust, or emotional indulgence. True mastery of influence is not about winning friends or pleasing the masses. It is about shaping decisions, guiding behavior, and securing loyalty in ways that serve one's objectives. Influence must be deliberate, measured, and flexible, capable of adapting to changing circumstances while reinforcing long-term control. The individual who understands the mechanics of influence recognizes that relationships are not mere social constructs. They are strategic tools to be cultivated, maintained, and occasionally discarded when they cease to serve a purpose. Calculated influence is thus the art of manipulating both perception and reality, aligning others' interests with one's own without revealing the full extent of one's intentions. To exercise influence effectively, one must first understand the motivations of others. People are driven by desires, fears, ambitions, and insecurities, and these impulses dictate their behavior far more than logic or morality. By observing patterns, listening carefully, and probing subtly, one can identify the levers that move individuals in the desired direction. A whisper of praise, a hint of opportunity, or even a carefully timed challenge can redirect actions and loyalty. Those who fail to recognize these dynamics often misplace trust, provoke unintended resistance, or waste resources on alliances that are superficial and fleeting. Influence is not an emotional connection. It is the manipulation of incentives and perceptions to produce predictable, controllable outcomes. Calculated influence also relies on the careful management of trust and dependency. No one maintains power in isolation, yet dependence must always be structured to favor the strategist. Alliances are valuable only when they enhance one's position without creating vulnerability. Those who are too generous or too transparent risk empowering others at their own expense. Conversely, the individual who cultivates selective loyalty ensures that allies are invested in one's success, often more than in their own, creating a network of actors whose actions reinforce strategic objectives. Influence is magnified when it becomes subtle, when others believe that decisions are their own while they are in fact guided. Control is nearly absolute. Timing is another critical element. Influence deployed too early may appear manipulative or forceful. Deployed too late, it may be irrelevant. The skilled practitioner waits for the exact moment when a word, a gesture, or a decision can tip the balance. Patience is as important as persuasion because the environment, relationships, and perceptions shift constantly. By observing, assessing, and then acting with precision, one ensures that influence produces maximum effect with minimal effort. Those who act impulsively may succeed in the short term, but often create resistance, suspicion, or unpredictable consequences that erode power over time. Furthermore, calculated influence requires the integration of multiple channels. In today's world, influence extends beyond direct interactions. It manifests through reputation, communication, alliances, and the strategic use of information. A carefully placed story, a demonstration of competence, or even the suggestion of authority can sway opinions without direct confrontation. Those who understand these dynamics manipulate not only people but the systems through which people perceive power. Influence is therefore a multi-layered instrument, encompassing personal interaction, public image, and the subtle orchestration of circumstances. Control of perception and strategic advantage are inseparable from influence. People follow those they believe are capable, confident, and inevitable. By projecting strength and consistency, one encourages compliance and admiration, while simultaneously discouraging opposition. Even failures can be transformed into instruments of influence if presented as calculated risks or lessons that others cannot comprehend fully. In this way, influence is reinforced not only by action but by narrative. The story that surrounds the strategist becomes a force in itself, shaping behavior, expectations, and loyalty. One must also recognize the fragility of influence. overreach, inconsistency, or exposure of hidden motives can undermine even the most carefully constructed networks. Therefore, influence is maintained through balance, rewarding loyalty, punishing disloyalty subtly, and managing perception meticulously. The successful strategist is neither overtly cruel nor blindly generous. Rather, each action is calibrated to produce obedience, alignment, or fear as circumstances dictate. Influence is not static. It must be continually nurtured, tested, and refined to remain effective. Ultimately, calculated influence is the convergence of observation, psychology, timing, and subtle manipulation. It allows one to move unseen, to guide decisions without confrontation, and to consolidate power through the actions of others. Those who master influence act not from impulse but from calculation, ensuring that every relationship, every word, and every gesture serves a purpose. Influence becomes not merely a tool, but the very mechanism through which strategy, advantage, and perception are reinforced, creating a system in which one's will shapes reality. In the realm of power, hesitation is a luxury few can afford, and delay often translates into missed opportunities or strategic failure. Knowledge, observation, and influence may grant one insight, but insight without decisive action is impotent. The individual who moves with precision and determination seizes advantage, shapes outcomes, and commands respect, while those who falter in indecision are perpetually reacting, never initiating, and invariably ceding power to others. Decisive action is not impulsive, it is deliberate, calculated, and executed with full awareness of both immediate consequences and long-term implications. In a world where competitors are ever watchful, moments of uncertainty are exploited, and the hesitant are swiftly marginalized or overpowered. The essence of decisive action lies in clarity of purpose. A person must understand both their objective and the landscape in which they operate. Without a clear goal, actions become scattered, inconsistent, and ineffective. Strategic clarity enables not only rapid execution, but also the ability to anticipate obstacles, manipulate rivals, and adapt mid-course without losing momentum. When one acts decisively, the impression of confidence amplifies influence, making others more likely to follow, defer, or yield. Even adversaries often hesitate when confronted with someone whose movements convey certainty, skill, and inevitability, because decisiveness signals control over circumstances that others cannot fully comprehend. Timing is inextricable from decisive action. Acting too soon may reveal intentions prematurely, while acting too late may allow rivals to consolidate power or exploit opportunities first. Mastery of timing requires patience, observation, and the ability to evaluate both tangible and psychological variables. The decisive individual senses the moment when conditions align to maximize impact and acts without hesitation. This synchronization of insight and execution transforms ordinary choices into transformative moves that shift power dynamics, ensuring that initiative is always held rather than relinquished. Decisive action also relies on understanding risk and reward. Every move carries potential consequences, and the strategist must weigh them with both courage and calculation. Boldness without discernment can lead to catastrophic failure, while caution without initiative yields stagnation. The balance is achieved when one acts decisively while mitigating vulnerabilities, masking true intentions, and exploiting the weaknesses of others. Calculated audacity often intimidates opponents and inspires allies, creating a perception of invincibility that multiplies the effect of a single action. Those who hesitate, however, provide openings for rivals to strike, eroding credibility and diminishing influence over time. Furthermore, decisive action is intertwined with the management of perception. Those who act swiftly and confidently are perceived as competent, authoritative, and inevitable, even if uncertainty lingers beneath the surface. Conversely, vacillation, second-guessing, or delayed responses broadcast insecurity, undermining authority and encouraging opposition. The perception of decisiveness often achieves as much as the action itself because humans instinctively defer to those they perceive as in control. By combining clarity, timing, and confidence, the individual ensures that every move reinforces a reputation of mastery, thereby multiplying the effectiveness of influence and strategic positioning. Another dimension of decisive action is the willingness to accept responsibility. In positions of power, outcomes are rarely flawless, and failures are inevitable. The individual who acts decisively does not shy away from accountability, but frames actions and consequences in ways that reinforce authority. Missteps can be transformed into demonstrations of calculated risk, taking lessons in strategy, or evidence of foresight that others cannot emulate. Hesitation, on the other hand, breeds uncertainty and cedes the narrative to those more willing to engage boldly, eroding trust and opportunity. The decisive actor understands that action itself, even when imperfect, often consolidates power more effectively than endless deliberation. Decisive action is also essential in conflict, negotiation, and competition. Indecision allows opponents to dictate terms, exploit vulnerabilities, and define the rules of engagement. The individual who asserts initiative first sets the framework for interaction, forcing rivals to react rather than act. This principle extends to both personal and professional arenas, whether maneuvering in business, social hierarchies, or political landscapes. Those who seize the initiative gain the privilege of shaping the environment according to their design. Bold moves inspire confidence, deter opposition, and create momentum that compounds advantage, transforming a single decisive choice into a cascade of opportunities and leverage points. Ultimately, decisive action is the intersection of courage, calculation, timing, and perception. It is the mechanism by which insight, observation, and influence are converted into tangible advantage. Those who hesitate allow chance and rivals to govern outcomes, while those who act with precision and conviction shape reality to their will. Decisiveness signals authority, manipulates perception, and establishes the individual as the mover of events rather than their passive observer. In a world defined by constant change, rigid adherence to a single strategy or worldview is a recipe for obsolescence. Power is not static, and those who cling to fixed methods often find themselves outmaneuvered by rivals who recognize the necessity of flexibility. The ability to adapt, to perceive shifts in circumstance, culture, and human behavior is perhaps the most potent instrument for sustaining and expanding influence. Adaptation is not mere survival. It is the deliberate transformation of strategy, tactics, and perception to exploit evolving conditions, turning potential threats into opportunities and ensuring that one remains a step ahead of those who rely solely on tradition, inertia, or luck. Adaptation begins with observation and awareness. The individual who masters change constantly scans the environment, interpreting both overt signals and subtle shifts in behavior, policy, or sentiment. Competitors, colleagues, and allies alike reveal tendencies through their actions, and the perceptive strategist reads these cues to anticipate shifts in power dynamics. By remaining attuned to the currents of circumstance, one can preempt challenges before they crystallize, adjust tactics to exploit emerging opportunities, and avoid becoming trapped by events that others fail to foresee. In essence, adaptation converts uncertainty into advantage, making the individual resilient to disruption and capable of transforming instability into leverage. Equally important is the cultivation of mental flexibility. Adaptation is not simply reactive, it requires the ability to rethink assumptions, reassess priorities, and embrace unconventional solutions. Those who rigidly adhere to past successes, familiar strategies, or entrenched ideologies risk irrelevance when the rules of engagement evolve. The successful strategist remains open to new methods, technologies, alliances, and perspectives, integrating them selectively to enhance influence while maintaining coherence in vision and purpose. Flexibility must be disciplined, guided by insight and foresight rather than whim, ensuring that every adjustment serves long-term objectives rather than momentary convenience. Power through adaptation also involves the management of perception in response to change. While tactics and strategies may shift, the outward appearance of authority, competence, and inevitability must remain intact. The individual who adapts effectively does so without appearing reactive or uncertain, maintaining the illusion of control even while navigating dynamic circumstances. Allies are reassured by the appearance of steady leadership, opponents are disoriented by subtle but decisive shifts, and observers interpret the strategist's flexibility as skill rather than vulnerability. In this way, adaptation is both practical and psychological, combining tangible adjustment with manipulation of expectation to consolidate power continuously. Adaptation further extends to relationships and alliances. Human dynamics are fluid, and those who fail to recalibrate their connections risk losing leverage or becoming ensnared by shifting loyalties. Strategic influence requires constant reassessment of who holds value, who possesses ambition or resources, and who might act as an obstacle. By adjusting engagement with allies, subtly shifting incentives, or redefining partnerships, one maintains control over the network of relationships that underpins authority. This requires foresight, subtlety, and sometimes ruthlessness, as the cost of failing to recognize or respond to changing alliances can be catastrophic in both social and professional spheres. In addition, adaptation requires embracing innovation and novelty. Those who cling to established conventions while the world evolves gradually relinquish advantage to those willing to experiment, anticipate, and implement new methods. Technological developments, cultural trends, and social shifts present both risk and opportunity. The adaptable individual is not intimidated by change. Rather, they integrate it strategically to amplify influence, outmaneuver rivals, and consolidate power in environments where others struggle to keep pace. Innovation, when deployed judiciously, becomes a force multiplier, extending the reach and impact of every move, decision, and relationship. Resilience is also a cornerstone of adaptive power. Change often brings disruption, uncertainty, and setbacks, and the unprepared falter in the face of adversity. The adaptive strategist, however, anticipates contingencies, prepares alternative paths, and adjusts swiftly when circumstances deviate from expectation. Setbacks are reframed as information, challenges are transformed into leverage, and apparent losses become temporary recalibrations in the pursuit of long-term dominance. By embracing the fluidity of circumstance, the individual ensures that power is not only preserved but expanded, even when confronted with forces beyond immediate control. Ultimately, power through adaptation is the convergence of perception, strategy, flexibility, and resilience. It allows one to navigate a world defined by uncertainty, competition, and change with an advantage that is both anticipatory and responsive. Those who resist adaptation are eventually outpaced, while those who embrace it convert every shift, disruption, and evolving opportunity into instruments of influence, positioning themselves as the architects of outcomes rather than passive participants in the unpredictable currents of human affairs.